been a few months for us since we got our good friend here in the studios at KCMO 95.7. He is a man who needs no introduction in Kansas City. He walks into Costco and the mobs are all over him. He's Nick Haines, Kansas City PBS. How are you, Nick?
Well, that's why I was delayed getting in. I mean, it was the autograph hunters right outside your building. It took a while to even get here. And last time I was here, you gave me that huge swag bag, as you remember.
Yes.
With mugs and T-shirts with your face on them. You've stepped it up even more this time. I think you got Hereford House gift cards in there this time. And is that a Harrison Butker bobblehead in the bottom, I see?
With a side of special sauce.
Okay.
All right?
There you go. Thank you.
Hey, you brought it up, not me. He's Nick Haines. And that is true, by the way. The mobs were outside. I was worried at like 9:01. I'm like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? And then I see him run into the studio. So he's here looking good as always. How are things going for you there? I mean, you were kind enough to have me on your show this week, but listen, I am a big fan of yours.
Yes.
and what you do and the way that you try to bring a truly balanced approach to Kansas City news. What's that been like for you lately?
Well, it's interesting because of some of the topics we'll probably be discussing and have been big in the news this week, which are really about, how do we view viewpoints that are different than our own. But it's amazing. Every single topic you do, you're going to get people outraged at you. And if you remember about a month ago, Quinton Lucas was testifying on Capitol Hill about student loans and the new president's student loan forgiveness program. So I asked on the program, innocently enough, why was Mayor Quinton Lucas in Kansas City? Is there some special problem we have here greater than anywhere else in the country that he has to go to Washington to testify on that issue? And when there's other types of debt, like medical debt and all of these other things, why this is so important. And boy, did I heard from outraged people, I'm offended, you know nothing about student loans. And it was just... that is where we are today. Every single thing you do is going to be decried. People are going to find a reason to be outraged about.
To be offended.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what it is. It's a victim mentality. So how do you handle that? I mean, you've been doing this now for decades, and you're trying to be balanced, and you are as balanced as anybody, I think, in local news.
Well, the best I can do is I was just reading a great audiobook called Hug Your Haters, and it's really for the corporate sector and how corporations do a great job when they also get, people giving them 1-star reviews and lashing out at them on social media because their flight was delayed 5 minutes or they didn't get their little pretzels on the plane. And Hug Your Haters is really a philosophy of saying, look, anybody who reaches out to you, if they didn't care about you, they wouldn't reach out at all. And so I've sort of leaned into that, and people are amazed, first of all, that I respond, and in a thoughtful fashion. That surprises people because they just want to throw out their anger at you or at the station. And then the second, that you're going to give something that is going to kill them with kindness. And that also surprises them. So actually, I've turned around some critics and people who have been very upset and turned them actually into some great stories and some friends over the years.
Is that right?
As a result of that. So, sometimes it works, but sometimes people you are never going to please, and you just have to move forward. You have to remember you are representing the entire community, and that's why, by the way, you're also on the program, Pete. I take a very broad view of diversity. Yes, we want to make sure we're looking like the city in which we live, but viewpoint diversity is a huge part of that, and we ignore that when we talk about diversity initiatives.
Well, that is very well said, and it's something that I've believed for a long time. It feels like diversity is simply based on the pigmentation of my skin or yours versus what is diversity of viewpoint. And we do have a very diverse region here in Kansas City, more so than, I think people believe probably on the coast that it's deep red, but it's really not. People in the city think it's deep blue. It's not. It's pretty diverse in terms of viewpoint around here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, for many years, worked in public radio, and that had a much more narrower band of people who listened. And when I came to public television, you noticed it immediately in the mailbag of the kinds of people who actually watched. And you remember, we are not a news service. We are a history programs and children's programming and science programs. And so the news is only a slither of that. And so the people who like the kind of programming we do are all over the political
map,
on the TV
the
ideological
side, which
divide.
is different from the radio side. And you're right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know people love to lump, when there's a controversy, to lump public radio and public television together. I do believe they are distinct audiences, mainly because public radio is a news service. We are not.
I'm so glad you said that, because listen, we have some fun here on KCMO goofing on some of the radio stuff, but it is not what the TV service is intended to be. I mean, I know a lot of people across the political spectrum that consume the TV that will never turn to the radio. And that's important to note when you talk about the distinctions between those two operations. And I like your idea of killing people with kindness, because I get the nasty emails too, Nick Haines. And sometimes what I do is I write out what I want to really say, and then I hit the delete button. I don't send it, but I write what I want to say. It makes me feel better. It's therapeutic, but I never send it. And then I'll try to kill with kindness on the back end. Yeah, that's what I do.
I want to go to your draft folder in your email and take a look at some of those.
No, you can't do that. There may be one or two missing or that I left in the draft folder, so you might actually see something in there. That is true, Nick Haines. That is very true. So take me through this week in Kansas City. There's this little story maybe you've heard of with Harrison Butker, the kicker. Yes. I know you're not a football guy, but I know you've heard of this story.
You're absolutely right. We're not a football guy. We're not a sports station, but boy, was that an interesting story. And in fact, though, just to give a little extra value in how we think about things, could I make that the number one story when there's other things happening? No, but it's a definite talker. And one of the issues here is today, as you know, in Kansas City, we have so many different channels. Few people get the newspaper. Most of us are living in very separate worlds where there is no common language. Mm-hmm. So other than the sports teams, you can talk about an issue and most people are going to have absolutely no clue what you're talking about. And so that is a common denominator for many people is our sports teams, which is why the stadium issue was such a big one and got great ratings when we did that stadium debate on it. So we have to recognize this is a big story. However, if you want to be called a week in review, this is what people are talking about. We want to make sure it was there. When I saw that speech, I pulled it from YouTube and I told one of our engineers, pull that right now because I'm sure that's going to be taken down. I was confident it was going to be taken down. Just as I was coming in, I wanted to look again. And so all credit to Benedictine College here on the Harrison Butker story when there have been now people from that organization now decrying what Harrison Butker said. They have stood by their guns. They could have taken that down. It is still there and available for everyone to see.
It's on YouTube. You can look it up for yourself, and you should. That way you get the full viewpoint of what he was saying, regardless of what you think of it. Nick Haines is on KCMO. Isn't it fascinating, too, Nick, that right now this team is not only the center of the NFL, but culturally, Taylor Swift with Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback on the planet, the commercials, Andy Reid, Mahomes. Now the kicker is a worldwide figure. Yes. And it's all right here in Kansas City.
Absolutely. And didn't I see those stories this morning about his jersey now being the number one seller on the NFL shop.com?
Yes.
So clearly people are voting with their feet with regards to that currently. And he did something that was really unthinkable, of course, just a week ago, and that was to actually get more media attention than Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. At the same time, more publicity than either of them. But I will have to say, when you think about this week, what's happened with the presidential debates, for instance, and the Presidential Debate Commission has sort of been cut out of the deal after almost 40 years putting on presidential debates. It's an organization that we say, a ritual that we've gone through that, is going by the wayside, is going to be done differently. What about commencement speeches? This week we had a AI robot by the name of Sophia who delivered the commencement address at a university in Buffalo, New York this week.
How about that?
And we're at the stage right now where can we even find a commencement speaker? They're being cancelled. They're being uninvited. There are protests. There are walkouts, whether about Gaza or Palestine. Even Jerry Seinfeld got all of these boos this week for his commencement speech. Are we coming to the point we can't even be in a space where you could possibly hear something where you have a view that you may not agree with? And is that going to change is there needing to be a moratorium on these commencement speeches as a result of this?
Wow. Could you imagine? I mean, that would be sad, but nothing would surprise me. He is Nick Haines. He's in our studio, Kansas City PBS on KCMO. He's got me on Weekend Review tonight, 7:30. I've always got it on my DVR. I don't always catch it. That's bedtime for the kids, but I'll watch it right after, Nick. So when do you hear from the most people? Is it after the Friday? Is it after the Sunday show? Is it throughout the week? What's kind of when do you know if something took off?
I love this. It's interesting because if you do a show that runs on a Friday night, it can sort of ruin your weekend. You're doing a show every day. Yeah. And so, you can roll with that. And then if your main thing is happening on a Friday night, then you're always worried about opening your email the next day because it can ruin your weekend.
Yeah.
And there are sometimes people have given the most wonderful, amazing comments And I mean, we love this program, etc. And I haven't opened it, and I didn't see it until like the Monday. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. But usually on that Friday night, and again, I try not to let it ruin my weekend and wait until a Monday before responding because, again, people are looking for reasons to be upset about something. It could be a guest, it could be the topic, but almost every topic is going to be somehow second guessed. But something wonderful did happen this week. I was cooking a meal for my wife. It was our anniversary. And I realized I was getting some of the ingredients together the night before, and it was about 9 o'clock at night, and I didn't have any Worcestershire sauce. You have to have that.
Of course.
And so I'm in my pajamas and slippers, and I go over to Price Chopper. This is like 9:15. It's dark, and I don't even get to the front door. The car screeches to a halt. A guy jumps out and says, "I love your program." I was like, I happen to be,
that's great,
in my pajamas doing it, But I will say, I went to AMC once with the kids, and then they said, a guy comes up to me and says, "Boy, I never thought you would wear jeans." So people watch these things. They make up their mind on the kind of person you are.
What are the pajamas for Nick Haines? What's the attire?
These were navy blue, basically a T-shirt with navy blue, lounge pants, basically,
yes.
and blue slippers.
Blue, you rock the slippers. You're not a flip-flop guy.
No, not a flip-flop guy. And as we were talking about a little bit earlier about public broadcasting, when I was in public radio, I was the news director of the public radio station in Lawrence, and a lobbyist in Topeka came to me once and said, "Hey, how are things in Lawrence?" And I said, "Well, I never lived in Lawrence. I'm in Kansas City." I said, "Really? I always thought you were part of the Brie and Birkenstock crowd." So people have assumptions, okay, about who you are, what you do, and so they may be surprised to see you at a WWE event in Kansas City, for instance.
Were you at one?
I certainly have. And we have all of the little wrestling figures in our basement. Our kids, we have 2 wrestling kids. And they were huge into it, and we would go along and certainly enjoy that.
That's awesome.
And here, when the British wrestler came on from the UK, boo!
Yeah.
Okay, that was when I felt intimidated.
Oh man! Well, I've got to imagine though, and I appreciate you for doing this because I got to imagine that when I'm on your show, there might be some more complaints based on, as you noted earlier, diversity of viewpoint that might be harder to find in some corners of Kansas City.
Well, it is absolutely true. I mean, and it's certainly true of the Harrison Butker story when we look at that is, what is our tolerance today for hearing a viewpoint different than our own? Again, most people, there was only about 500 people at the graduation ceremony in Atchison to hear Harrison Butker speak. But boy, every single person, other than perhaps King Charles, I'm still waiting for the British monarch to come and give a statement on this because he's the only one who hasn't yet. To then, but we even if it didn't touch our ears, we have to be upset about it. And similarly, that is true of anybody we have on the show. I mean, you have, people are not willing to accept another viewpoint. I'm never going to contribute to public television again if Pete Mundell was on your show.
Oh.
We get those. However, again, I'm out and about. I was at the Martin City Brewery, in fact, earlier in the week, and several people, not just one, said they love the show and they love it when you were on the program. So that is the
nice
way. And our receptionist at work at our Kansas City PBS station says she listens to you every morning, and you just make her laugh.
Well, that's great.
There we go.
And I'm sure John makes her laugh, too, with his zingers and one-liners
Absolutely
in there.
No. She's outraged by John Anthony. I'm sorry. I didn't want to tell it to him to his face. He's outraged by him. We'll be sending a letter to Cumulus about him.
About John Anthony. That's hilarious. Not the first one we've gotten about John, by the way. All right. Take me through this. And I do want to ask you about this because we're talking about, importance of diversity of viewpoint. And
yes.
NPR formerly punished Yuri Berliner, the senior editor who publicly argued here in the last couple of weeks that, public radio does have some issues when it comes to, in his opinion, losing America's trust as a legitimate news organization. How do you view that and how this thing has played out?
Well, first of all, I saw that on a social media tweet. I thought, okay, this is interesting. I read the whole piece that he did, a very extensive, laying out, multiple arguments, dozens of different examples of things that were happening. And, in many respects, it made my chest tighten because some of the things he talks about could be viewed at most newsrooms today, including our own, about the, he talks about, checklists on, guests and what their racial composition is. And absolutely, we do all of those things. I asked actually, because we are public television and he wasn't with public radio, one of the reporters in public radio here in Kansas City about it and how it was being viewed by their management and did they have a conversation about it. And he said, well, I was the fifth person to come to him about it and all of them were outside of the organization. Inside the organization, there was not one word about it whatsoever. It was a non-story. Nothing was mentioned. And similarly, in our own television station, other than me mentioning it, I don't think I've ever heard one word ever stated about it. It was move on. There was nothing to be seen here.
Wow, interesting. Okay, well, it's good to know.
But I think we need to be reflective, again, of the community, and I think that our relevance for the future relies on us, not ignoring half of the country.
Yeah.
When we not only think about the topics we're doing, but how we treat that topic when we're doing it, and the kind of guests and panelists we have on programs to talk about it. I do a show that it relates to the media or has media folks talk about the issues. We're not in Los Angeles and New York, so I don't have 1,000 people to draw upon.
Yeah.
For that
That's
program.
why you're stuck with guys like me.
So, some people, you could never go far enough for some people, and you go too far for others. But we try. The work is, this is unfinished. We're a marathon, not a sprint, and our goal is to make sure we have more voices, not less.
And I really do think, I like it because sometimes I do this show, and I'm by myself, and we talk to callers who may dissent, but it is nice to sit with people in that kind of a setting and hear different viewpoints, even if I disagree. I think that's healthy. I think we should encourage that, not be like, oh, man, we got to cancel this person, cancel that. I love doing that. I think it's important to do, and I think you do a great job of that.
Well, but it's actually rare. I'm not patting myself on the back, but there aren't spaces that way anymore.
Yes.
And it's increasingly true of, when we just did the stadium tax debate, nobody knows the aggravation and difficulty of bringing different players together. And the reality was, John Sherman, it was easier for him just to go to a sports radio station and do a sit-down interview in a one-on-one situation than put himself in any situation where you were going to have a rival point of view expressed. There was no need for him to do that because other places were going to offer it. It was important to us to make sure we had voices for and against, and multiple voices for and against, to do something that was worthwhile and that was important for viewers.
You did a great job with that, by the way. I don't know if we've talked. I think we've talked on the air since, not in person, but that was very well done. That town hall at the library. Who, when you look back on that time here in the next couple of minutes, who was the biggest winner and the biggest loser coming out of that period of time here in Kansas City?
Well, let me just say this. On that program, if you remember, Sly James was the main advocate. And on our weekend review program after that, Dave Helling said he was the biggest loser from that election because who would ever want him to be the ambassador on any issue ever again in Kansas City? And he was viewed as arrogant. However, I gave him a lot of credit, because we just gave up on the teams completely because we couldn't get them to agree to anything. They didn't want to do anything. So we reached out to him. He said yes immediately. He put himself out there in a way that most people don't. We wanted a second chair with him, a second person.
Yes.
Because we had two opponents. And boy, we could not get another person to stand up there. For all the people claiming to be part of this and part of the coalition to make sure that stadium tax passed, all these top corporate and civic leaders, no one. They ran for the hills. And I gave him a lot of credit for putting himself up there to make that happen. That is, again, very, very rare in this community.
It is. No, that's so true. All right, so here in the next minute, what do we got coming up on the show tonight outside of Harrison Butker?
Well, we were 3 months now since the Chiefs Parade shooting. It was interesting, what really actually changed as a result of that. We know, for instance, that, we were told enough is enough. We have to do something about violence in this community. Lisa Lopez Galvin was that Johnson County mother of two who died. She was the 13th person murdered that year. We're now at 52. So clearly we haven't completely learned all of these lessons. And then the fund, the great story from Fox 4 about the fund that was set up to help the victims, and people bought all those T-shirts, $1.8 million collected, and not one dime, not 1 cent has gone to anyone. Nothing has been dispersed. I thought that was an interesting story you got to keep an eye on. And then we got all this hacking situation. The speech that Harrison Butker made got lots of attention, but Mayor Quinton Lucas made a big speech too. Went on for about 10 minutes, and he said absolutely nothing about what was happening with continuing outrage for a second week in a row, an outage of computers, people still not being able to pay their water bills online, builders not being able to get permits in Kansas City because they can't get that done, and yet we knew nothing about what happened, Who is behind it? Is there a timeline for completing this investigation? We didn't get anything as a result of all of that.
Tonight, 7:30, Kansas City PBS. He is Nick Haines. It is great to have him here. And give our best to your receptionist, who is a great Monday in the Morning listener. Thank you, Nick.
All right. Thanks for having me.